Hi, thank you for watching Digging to China. I'm Dong Xiong. Xi Jinping wants China to learn how to make friends and influence people. Speaking at a study session for the Communist Party's top leadership on Monday, May 31st, the Chinese president said it was important for the country to tell its story in a positive way, presenting the image of a credible, lovable, and a respectable China, according to state-run news agency Xinhua. He added that the party's propaganda organizations need to make it clear to the world that Beijing wants nothing but the Chinese people's well-being. Xi's vision makes sense. Since taking power in 2012, he has pushed for China to take a bigger role in global affairs. But aside from Russia and Pakistan, China has few strong diplomatic relations with major world powers. What Xi didn't say was that his country currently has a big image problem in many parts of the world. A Pew Research report from late 2020 found that of 14 countries surveyed across Europe, North America, and East Asia, every one had a majority negative view of China. Part of Beijing's image problem comes from the COVID-19 pandemic and allegations the government covered up the original outbreak in Wuhan in December 2019, potentially worsening the global spread of the virus. But opinions of China were worsening even before the pandemic, and a part of that is down to the country's embrace of wolf warrior diplomacy. Named after a series of nationalistic Chinese action films, this jingoistic foreign policy first began to take shape in 2019 when top diplomats began aggressively calling out alleged slights against China in press conference or on social media. In July 2019, Zhao Lijian, then a counselor at the Chinese embassy in Pakistan, began to condemn what he saw as the United States' hypocrisy over human rights, pointing out Washington's own problem with racism, income inequality, and gun violence. Zhao's full-throated defense of China was controversial, but it got him a promotion to foreign ministry spokesperson, and other Chinese diplomats started to mirror him. There have been reports of unease of the wolf warriors inside China's diplomatic community, but for now, there is no signs that Zhao or his colleagues being reined in, especially not when their approach is so popular with domestic audience. After top Chinese diplomat Yang Jiechi told his U.S. counterparts in March that Washington does not have the qualification to speak to China, his catchphrase was quickly printed on T-shirts sold in Beijing and other cities. Xi might want China to extend the hand of friendship to the world, but with the wolf warriors of the foreign ministry howling at his back, many countries might be reticent to take the chance. The transition is often attributed to current Chinese leader Xi Jinping, who was certainly reshaped China's global image into a far more prominent and assertive one. But this shift has been far longer in the making. As China undertook much-needed reforms under Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping, recovering from the multiple decades of catastrophic economic policies and the general chaos under Chairman Mao Zedong, Chinese foreign policy was carefully muted. In the early 1990s, as China coped with global outrage over the Tiananmen Square massacre, Deng famously admonished the rest of the Chinese leadership to maintain a low profile, suggesting observe calmly, secure our position, cope with affairs calmly, hide our capacities, and bide our time, be good at maintaining a low profile, and never claim leadership. In Chinese, it is 冷静观察，稳住阵脚，沉着应付，韬光养晦，绝不当头。This was later amended to include do something or work with what you have, in Chinese 有所作为。 Even as China's economy took off, Deng, who remained a powerful factor albeit behind the scenes, continued to influence Chinese foreign policy. With Beijing refraining from a higher profile role, this began to shift in 2000. Following Jiang Zemin's rule and a period of World Trade Organization associated liberalizations, Chinese leader Hu Jintao began to assert an increasingly prominent role for China. Hu pushed for greater Chinese foreign direct investment as a part of a broader effort to expand China's global economic presence. Indeed, it was under Hu Jintao that the string of pearls infrastructure investment in the Indian Ocean region began to take shape. This included investments in Bangladesh, Myanmar, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Despite the peaceful rise mantra adopted by the CCP under Hu's leadership, however, China's stance was not simply one of outreach and investment. In 2010, after a Chinese fishing boat captain was arrested having rammed 2 Japanese Coast Guard vessels, Beijing made it clear that it expected the return of their citizen. Even after the captain was released, however, Beijing nonetheless imposed an embargo on the export of rare earth elements. This naked display of Chinese economic leverage caught everyone's attention. While Hu's shift towards a more assertive Chinese foreign policy was generally associated with China's growing soft power, Hu, in fact, emphasized the importance of the Chinese People's Liberation Army. In 2004, Hu issued the new historic missions for the PLA. Among other tasks, the PLA was charged with safeguarding China's interests in the key domains of the world's oceans, outer space, and electromagnetic spectrum and information space. The PLA took these new responsibilities seriously. At sea, not only was the PLA Navy expanding and modernizing, but it also began to challenge U.S. naval vessels operating in what China claimed to be its territorial waters. The harassment of the USNS Impeccable and the USS John McCain III in 2009 marked the start of a much more assertive Chinese stance in its littoral waters. In space, China tested an anti-satellite weapon in 2007, the most debris-generating event in the space age. In the cyber realm, Chinese hackers moved even more brazenly and extensively. What was missing from the Chinese effort was a strong foreign ministry. China is governed through the equivalent of a dual structure. Policy setting is done by the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, its top leadership represented by the 24 members of the Political Bureau of the CCP Central Committee, and especially the subset comprising the Politburo Standing Committee is the actual power in China. In the post-Mao period, the CCP Politburo Standing Committee has varied from 5 to 9 members. It currently has 7 members. Policy implementation, on the other hand, is by the Chinese state, as reflected in the 25 ministries comprising the State Council, where the Chinese state is ostensibly led by the premier, vice premiers, and other members of the State Council. In reality, those elements are creating plans to support the priorities set by the Politburo. Divining Chinese policy is further complicated by the reality that the members of the State Council are not necessarily the highest-ranking members of the CCP, while the head of the CCP, the General Secretary, and the China's President are the same person. Politburo members may be relatively low-ranking ministers. As important, senior government officials may nonetheless be relatively lesser-ranked members of the CCP. What matters most is one's place in the party, not the state. This was the situation for the Chinese Foreign Ministry for much of the 2000s. Chen Qi-chen, China's foreign minister, state councilor, and vice premier during much of Jiang Zemin's rule, was also a member of the CCP Politburo. This meant that the Chinese foreign ministry had a place among China's policymakers. But when Chen was replaced by Tang Jiaxuan as foreign minister in 1998, Tang was not a member of the Politburo, nor was he subsequently elevated to its membership, even after he rose to the State Council in 2003, nor were his various successors as foreign ministers and a state counselor for foreign affairs. Thus, for most of the first 2 decades of the 21st century, China's foreign ministry was not represented on the highest levels of the CCP. This meant that the Chinese foreign ministry had a minimal role in setting China's foreign policy. While foreign ministry officials could be called upon to brief and otherwise advise, they were not necessarily part of the final establishment of policy. China's foreign ministers were excluded from the central decision-making body of the Politburo until 2017, when Yang Jiechi, now the state counselor for foreign affairs, who is more senior than the foreign minister, was elevated to the 19th Politburo of the CCP. This not only integrated foreign ministry views into the setting of foreign policy, but also elevated its personnel in terms of China's internal political structure. It is in this context that China's diplomats and the foreign ministry spokespeople are now undertaking their duties. With this elevation, the Chinese diplomat corps has become much more energetic, even aggressive. The most public incident was the tweet by Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian, responding to President Trump's characterization of the COVID-19 virus as Chinese coronavirus and a Wuhan flu. Zhao tweeted, "CDC was caught on the spot. When did the patient zero begin in US? How many people are infected? What are the names of the hospitals? It might be US Army who brought the epidemic to Wuhan. Be transparent. Make public your data. US owe us an explanation." Zhao's tweet and its reference to a conspiracy theory suggesting that the disease might have been deliberately spread by the US military aroused a major global reaction as media worldwide discussed it. Comparisons were made to the Wolf Warrior series of Chinese action movies, which feature a Chinese special operation force soldier who defeats American mercenaries in battles across Africa. The COVID-19 crisis has bared the teeth of Chinese diplomats. Beijing's representatives in France, Sweden, and Venezuela have all issued papers and statements that smack of imperial high-handedness. An unnamed Chinese diplomat posted a statement that included the claim that French nurses had abandoned their patients in nursing homes, leaving them to starve. The Chinese embassy in Caracas tweeted that the Venezuelan officials should put on a face mask and shut up after they had referred to the Wuhan virus. The Chinese ambassador was summoned to the Swedish Foreign Ministry after comparing Sweden to a lightweight boxer taking on a heavyweight. Part of this more assertive, even aggressive foreign policy demeanor is almost certainly rooted in the bureaucratic elevation of the foreign ministry. Since they are now part of the policy-making environment, they have far more influence on actual foreign policy of the PRC. Able to influence Chinese foreign policy directly for the first time in 2 decades, rather than defer to other parts of the system. Current Chinese diplomats may well want to differentiate themselves from their predecessors as well. As the world emerges from the lockdowns and the disruptions caused by COVID-19, it will be a new world in many ways. The economic and the political impacts have yet to be fully assessed. What is clear is that the Chinese leadership intends to play a major role in shaping that post-COVID-19 world, and its diplomatic corps will aggressively assert China's interests to that end. The United States should not expect to face a relatively low-profile Chinese effort that applies nations with economic aid in the background, but will instead likely confront a festive corps of diplomats equipped with a robust set of tools ranging from economic aid to social media accounts that will challenge them at every turn. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly.